Well, good morning, everybody. I am very glad to have you here. My name is Ana Cortázar, and I've been helping companies in the last 15 years to look the international markets. This time, I am very glad to share with you one of the initiatives that we have been working on with some good friends, such as Ronnie Magwanasi. The idea behind this project is to get closer to the regions that are in the southern hemisphere. Um, in my whole process of helping companies going abroad, I have questioned how come Latin America and Africa, or Latin America or regions such as ASEAN, are not closer enough, because we have the very similar market maturity, and as well similar regulatory environment. And I think that companies lack inspiration, trusted connections, and specific knowledge. And that's why in Lane, we are giving this opportunity to companies to actually get in touch directly with the advisors that they need to have in these regions in order to explore these markets. So why it is important for us to have a strategy in the southern hemisphere countries? Well, if you look at the data, these countries' populations is below 50% of the populations of these countries is below 35 years old. So we are the markets of the future. That's why we think that it's very important to get closer and have a strategy in these regions, because it's very difficult to have good understanding of the risks and the opportunities in these regions. As well, the business information in these regions is fragmented, and it's really a privilege to have a trusted advisor in these regions. That's why we are launching Lane. Lane is a learning network for doing business in the Southern Hemisphere countries, where SMEs, startups, freelancers can actually access to master classes done by business experts. As well, the idea is for this people to schedule appointments and get inspired by the community that we are building. The idea is to have and construct a community that boosts the development of business in the Southern Hemisphere. And well, that's why we have today our very special advisor, Ronnie Makawanasi. Ronnie is from South Africa, and today he's going to give us an overview of the Africa business environment, and how what things we should consider in order to look Africa as a business opportunity. Well, I will also want to share with you that we have other advisors in other countries, and the idea of this initiative is to start doing these master classes so that more knowledge is shared around these regions. I would like to invite you to join us in the LinkedIn groups that we have, where we have already about 141 members. We have these groups in order to start to making a community around Latin America and these regions, Africa, Middle East, ASEAN, India. And as well, we have a Telegram group. Later on, I will share with you in the chat the link to join the Telegram group, where we can actually share initiatives among us. So that's all. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance. I would like to give the word to Ronnie Magwanasi. Ronnie is a very good friend. We actually met in the pandemia, and I think that it's one of the good things that the pandemia has brought to us. These connections, actually, we feel that nevertheless, I am here in Colombia and Ronnie is in South Africa. We can still, like cooperate and work in an initiative such as this. So thank you, Ronnie, and you have the word.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, for the introduction. Can you hear me, Anna? Can we just start there first?
Yes, I hear you perfectly.
Okay, thank you so much. It's the first time today I am doing a public lecture wearing these glasses. So It's my eyes, I think, as I'm growing older, are sort of, catching up with me, but I'm also told I look very good in them. So please forgive me for wearing these glasses today. I am very excited to be here. Anna has already introduced me as Ronnie. Anna, I want to also teach you how to pronounce it. It's Ronnie Mkwanazi.
Okay.
So Mkwanazi is the way to pronounce it. And of course, in Africa, we have as one of our sayings, a saying that says, if you want to go fast, you must go alone. But if you want to go far, you must go together with others. And it is for that reason why today I am so honored to be part of this network. And of course, it's one of the benefits, as Anna has mentioned, of what the digital world has become lately. Most of the people who are on this committee, the Lane Committee with the Afcfta chapter, most of them we met during the coronavirus pandemic. We all met online. Everybody, as you know, is trying to, contest for space on social media. And I was very impressed, I must tell you, when I first saw, Anna trying to reach out to my fellow Africans to become part of this network. And, I am a firm believer that trade is the quickest way out of the ghetto. And for me, every time when people come together because they want to talk about trade, culture, or business, I do not hesitate to participate. I am a fan of collaboration. As you all know, in today's world, collaboration is the new competition. We can only do it by collaborating. And of course, the proximity and, as Anna has stated, the similarities, between our two continents are so, real that there's no other option. But for us as Africans and our fellow Latin Americans, it's important for us to collaborate and try and create new markets, new opportunities, new relationships, and so forth. So that's why I am very happy to be here today, because I believe in the cause, and then particularly this cause that we're working on. So just to give you an idea of how, where, African people, generally come from, especially, I'm in the south, of Africa. I'm at the tip of Africa. It's called, we are at the last part of our land along the ocean is the Cape of Good Hope. It's the peninsula, and we have, as South Africa, 3,000 plus kilometers of shoreline, of a coastline. And of course, our country is 8 times the size of England in terms of, land mass. We have a population of, depending on who you're talking to, maybe 50 million, but there could be more because, in our region especially, there's a lot of influx of immigrants from neighboring countries coming to South Africa for opportunities. So South Africa is sort of like the economic hub, this the most functional economic hub in the continent at the moment. It's got I wouldn't say the biggest economy, but a very sizable one. And as you know, we have about 50 countries on the African continent, and no, they're not all next to each other. So, for example, for me to fly from South Africa to just the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, which is in the center of Africa, would take me about 4 hours by flight to get there. And of course, the further north you go, it becomes important. But if I have to just give you a brief, background of where my ancestors in the African continent come from, for example, they come from Central Africa, and we started migrating, from the North Central Africa down towards the southern part of Africa, looking for grazing land. So as you can see, there was an economic migration of some sort because, in Africa, livestock is not just meat. It's also, it has cultural significance. We use cattle, for example, for getting married. We use cattle for celebrations. We use not just cattle, but different forms of livestock, goats as well. And we use those mainly for many cultural events, and not just in South Africa, but on the continent as a whole. So Once you're a young man, traditionally in Africa, when you're a young man and you become of age to get married, your father will, give you some cows, so you can take those cows to go and marry, the person that you want to get married to. And of course, as you grow, the culture continues. So the more cows you have, the more grazing land you want. And of course, many wars have been fought amongst different tribes in Africa over grazing land. The same as, in some parts of the world, there's fights about oil. Lately, there's even fights about water. Can you believe it? We're there already. And many other, fights around it. So my ancestors migrated from the Central Africa, around the Cameroon, this kind of environments. That's many generations ago, and we ended up here. So it's important that I give the culture, because I want you to understand as we go, what type of continent Africa is. Many people on this platform are very familiar, for example, with the business cultures of, say, the Japanese. And I think there's many books and so on that has been written about this. And people could easily say, if you go to Japan, this is the culture that you must expect. And of course, culture plays a very important part in doing business. If you get it wrong, you may be kicked out of the country, or you may not get the transaction you're looking for. So effectively, the African culture is mainly along the lines of the Japanese culture in terms of the hierarchy we always talk about. There's the big boss and everybody down the line, and you have to defer to your elders in a respectful manner. And in Africa, there's a belief that it takes a village to raise a child. So what that means basically is that a child in Africa is a child for everyone. So every time that child sees an adult, whether or not it's their parent or relative, they have to respect that person. That is basically, the foundational principles of us as African people, and so on. So the deferment, therefore, Africans believe in what we call in South Africa, we have a specific word for it, and of course, many other African, countries would have a name for it. We call it Ubuntu, which is Ubuntu, Ubuntu, which basically means humanity or humaneness. And that is the overriding principle that guides Africans in their daily interaction with themselves and with other people. So Ubuntu, which is humanity, the core starts with humanity, and we have a belief that if you start on the right foot from purely a humanity point of view, even if your deal is bad, it may just succeed, because of that.
Ronnie,
So
one question. Sorry to interrupt you. Are you showing the presentation right now?
no, and I was kicked off the presentation when you
Great.
took over. So
Great. So no, you can share your presentation whenever you like.
okay, that's fine. Thank you so much. So in a nutshell, Ubuntu is the basis of business transactions in Africa. It's a relationship thing. It's easier to get transactions going if you start from a humanity point of view, and that's what guides us. Now, what I want to do today is to basically, just do a helicopter ride of, the environment on the continent. I mean, from a language perspective, just Nigeria, in Nigeria alone, you have about 250 different languages, right? This is just in Nigeria. Nigeria's population is about 100 and so million. So that's the most populated country on the African continent. And that tells you, in South Africa, for example, we have 11 official languages, and we are just 50 million people. So the language issue becomes really a big thing. And what I certainly, as a businessman and as a lawyer, what I normally do when we do cross-border transactions is to try and identify a local partner in that country who can, link me up with the right people, or point me in the right direction. So that's obviously very important, because language can be a barrier, the same way as ignorance can be a trade barrier. So that's important to know, that we've got multiple languages on this continent, and so on. So that becomes the first thing. But I want to maybe go to my presentation now. Tell me if you can see it. Can you see it, Anna?
Not yet, Ronnie.
Okay, maybe I'll have to share my screen again. Let me do that. Okay, great. That will be it, and that's what I will be sharing. Okay, great.
There, we
So,
see perfectly.
okay, thank you, Anna. I'm gonna maybe ask you to maybe help me with moving my screen, because I think when it's connected to you guys, it's not moving. So I'll just raise my hand and you can just move it for me, right? So maybe move to the next one, and then I can do the introduction to the presentation. Are you able to do that?
If you are sharing right now, you're sharing your screen.
Yes, I am, Anna. Can you
So
see it?
then you must do the presentation. But yeah, there you're moving it.
Okay, perfect. That's fine. I got it. I got it. That's fine. Thank you. All right. So, my name is Ronnie Mkwanazi. I am a corporate and international trade lawyer based in South Africa. My international qualification is a Master's of International Business Law from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom, which I got in 2001 as a Nelson Mandela Scholar. So in South Africa, I have been practicing as a lawyer for the past 20 years. I am the director of a firm that I established in 2004, and is 17 years this year. And I mainly deal in corporate law, commercial law, and international trade law. So those are my areas of expertise. I have sat on many different boards of companies in the country, both in the state-owned environment. I've sat on boards of state-owned companies, and I have also sat on boards of corporate. So I understand the environment very, very well, from both angles. And as I've mentioned, I've sat on boards and all of it. So the reason, what I want to do, Anna, is to maybe just give an overview of, just at a high level, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which of course is the most topical element in Africa right now, if not in the world. And it's also one of the reasons why everybody now has some sense of interest or purpose insofar as Africa is concerned and wanting to do business there. So up until where we are now, remember that many African countries were colonized by different, countries at the time. So, for example, you have countries like that were colonies of French countries, which we now call francophone countries. Those countries basically mainly speak French because of their history as French colonies, and therefore for those countries they mainly use French law as the law of their land because of the historical influence. So, for example, if you're dealing in countries like, say the DRC, Cote d'Ivoire, all those Benin, all those countries that have, a French language, you're likely to find that they apply French law. And French law is very different from the civil law, which we apply in South Africa. So the civil law is mainly applied um, by countries that were former British colonies, and those are mainly countries in the SADC region, including, countries like India and the likes. They basically mainly use common law. Civil law, and that is also underpinned in South African case by what we call common law as well. So you can already imagine that, these various legal instruments and legal systems definitely is a barrier to trade in more ways than one. And I'll give you an example. So in the civil law environment, for you to be a judge, right, to adjudicate in a court of law, in a high court, you have to be old and gray, right? So meaning that you would have worked as a judge, in the profession for other reasons, and at some point, you get old and you qualify to be a judge. So most of the decisions in those countries are taken on the basis of similar decisions that were taken in the past. So in a sense, you have some form of certainty in terms of what law the court is going to use to make a ruling on a judgment in your case. But in the francophone countries, the French legal system, cases are not decided based on how previous cases were decided. They're decided on the facts at that point in time. So basically, you find, I also used to lecture part-time on a master's program, and the French judges were very young people, even younger than me. and this guy was a judge in his country. The reason being that in their country, you don't need to have that experience of how cases are decided. You decide it based, so every case could be decided differently, even though they may have the same facts. And so to take it to another extreme, countries like Mozambique, the former Portuguese colonies, they use Portuguese law. And unlike in civil law, the Portuguese law, you are guilty until proven innocent, right? And that's a very important consideration, because in civil law, you are innocent until proven guilty. So the onus lies on you to prove that, on the state to prove that you are guilty. But in the Portuguese legal system, you have to prove that you are innocent, and that has a long consequence on the outcome of the case. Now, Africa has now finally adopted the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And in terms of this agreement, the idea was that Africa wanted to strengthen economic relations as to determine those, because up to this point, there's a lot of, as I've mentioned, the economic relations are poor because of the environment. For instance, the intra-Africa trade between African countries, as of the latest 2020 statistics, we're sitting at just under 20%, African countries trading among themselves, as opposed to, for example, in the European Union, where the intra-European trade statistics are sitting above 70%. So it shows you that the Africans themselves still have to work very hard to move towards a continental market by 2063. So Africa has an agenda called Africa 2063, where effectively, we want to create a common market. So right now, we have the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is basically an FTA. And the idea is to expand the market amongst African countries and secure the market, but also to encourage a trade between Africa as a bloc with the rest of the world. So that's why the Afcfta is so important. It's very new. Africa, by the way, also at a regional level, is also very segmented. You have 4 regional trading blocs in Africa. ECOWAS is an example of them, which is in West Africa, and of course in SADC you have the Southern African Development Community, and there's also a huge challenge in harmonizing those different environments as well from a legislation point of view. So that also is something that the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is going to address. And of course, the terms of the agreement is that we want to, as I've mentioned, inter-regional trade to be accelerated and diversify our exports. All the African countries has now signed the agreement. So since 1 July, it was, in 2020, it was supposed to be operationalized. It was postponed to this year. So from January 2021, the agreement became effective when all the countries had agreed to it. At a regional level in the continent, the SADC countries have the highest intra-Africa trade among themselves, mainly because you have South Africa in the region, which has very well, fully functional economic infrastructure as a country, South Africa. And because of that, for example, South Africa has a customs union within SACU, Southern African Customs Union, which is between Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and Swaziland. And in that union, obviously, South Africa is the collector of taxes for import and export purposes. And as a result, those countries around South Africa are able to benefit from the trade, statistics and trade opportunities that come to South Africa. So the creation of a common market in terms of Agenda 2063 is the ultimate achievement that the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement wants to achieve. What I've put here now is basically an overview map so that you can see, which countries in Africa, has what in terms of their products. You can see that in the bottom part and the center of Africa, you have a lot of the gold color, which basically represents precious metals. There is gold, diamonds, platinum, titanium, and all other, from a platinum product, for example, you can get 7 other products coming just from platinum itself. So that whole gold region, you see there's gold there, is somewhere in the east of Africa. In the center, there's diamonds. That's where the DRC and them are. And then the blue is the oil and gas. As you can see, that's more in West Africa, Central Africa and so forth. And then, of course, not surprisingly, in the Arab world, that's also a huge oil, environment. And then, of course, Kenya, you see there's a huge production in tea, and of course coffee lately as well. Ethiopia, the same, coffee. And then, of course, cocoa trading in ivory, in ivory and fisheries in Senegal, and so on. So this is just to give you a sense of the comparative advantage, if you like, that Africa as a continent would have. So, of course, that diamonds and gold are found in Africa, but the price is set in London. So, those are some of the things that the Africans are trying to correct. And of course, all the reserves, well, I mean, just in South Africa alone, if I can tell you, one of our mining companies yesterday declared a dividend which was going to see about $500 million being paid to the tax revenue, and this is for they mine coal. So coal is quite big in the region. But unfortunately, the challenge we have in the continent, as you'll see, I'll go through some of them as we talk, is the issue of creating finished goods. Because most of our basically resources from the ground come out of the ground onto a truck or a train, down all the way to the coast, onto a ship, and then off to China. Or other parts of the world. So we really have the biggest challenge in Africa, being what we call beneficiation of products. And as you can see, I mean, if you just look at the map I'm showing you now, you really have to ask yourself, but why is this continent called poor? Because it looks like, whatever resources the world is using in abundance is actually found on this continent. So it shows you the opportunities as a result that are many on this continent. Whether you want to import Kenyan tea or Kenyan coffee to your countries, or whatever other precious metals. Textiles in South Africa, for example, the textiles used to be a big market in South Africa, but we had a lot of market disruptions from dumping and so forth being done in the country, and our apparel market took a very huge knock. But of course, because of the numbers that we have on the African continent, you will see as we go down where the other opportunities are. Anna, can I just check, how do you want us to do this? Do you want me to finish my presentation and then have a question and answer? Because I don't mind people asking questions as I go, yeah?
Yes, Ronnie, the idea will be to have 15 minutes of questions at the end of your presentation, so you can go on. If some of you in the room would like to do any question, you can leave it in the chat, and perhaps we can do those questions at the end.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Thank you so much, Anna. Okay, so that was just to give you a sense of what there is in Africa. So if you are a serial entrepreneur, I'm sure you've already seen which country you want to go to next after seeing this slide. So in a nutshell, that is that. But of course, for example, in South Africa, what most of you may not know, we have a very massive, if I may, automobile industry. We have approximately 4 OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, producing cars in South Africa. We have a Ford plant. Most of the Ford Ranger buses you see are made in South Africa. We have a VW plant in South Africa as well, where they do your small cars, your Polo Vivos, and those small cars VW makes in South Africa. For the Africa and the European market, by the way, we have a BMW plant in South Africa. We used to produce the 3 Series BMWs. But I don't know what happened, and BMW decided to produce their X3s here in South Africa. So most of the X3s you see in Europe and in Africa are manufactured in South Africa. We have a Toyota plant as well. And of course, lately we've had some of the new Chinese brands also setting up shop in South Africa. Your GWMs and then Hyundai, very big currently now also in South Africa. They are also setting up plants and so on. So South Africa has a very strong, economic infrastructure, as I said, and of course, what also supports South Africa, which most of the African countries battle with, is financial regulation and financial infrastructure. So South Africa is known to be, one of the world leaders insofar as, the financial system works in the country. So that really helps us. And it's one of the things I think when we do harmonization, we will have to really start with. I would actually like to start with that, Anna, just so that you know, we've already had this discussion around us embarking on a project to do harmonization on the African continent. And this, I think, if you can get financial regulation right as a start, and you have the experience already with what you've done in Latin America, I think a lot of other things can follow from that. So yeah, I'm going to take you up on your offer, Anna. Here on this picture is just the regional blocks I wanted to show you in Africa. I've already mentioned with Southern Africa, east to the right, west to the left, North Africa on top, and Central Africa in the middle. And you will see as we go down, I will give some ideas of the stability levels at each of the regions and so on. But in a nutshell, the objectives of the Afcfta is to create a single market for goods, services, and to facilitate the movement of people. So I always say to people that, free trade is about the movement of goods, services, and people, and that's what we're trying to achieve. As I've mentioned, the idea is to work towards a common customs union, because for now it's just a free trade area. The idea is to liberalize the market for goods and services. It's still a big challenge, especially aviation. It's not easy to just wake up and set up an airline that goes across the African borders, different, environments there. Of course, the movement of capital and natural persons, we just spoke about the financial regulatory environment. How easily can money go into and out of the continent if needs be, but most importantly, keep it within the continent from a investment point of view. The issue, by the way, of citizenship or migration is still not finalized. The issue of competition law is also still not finalized, and we all know why. You can imagine those are the most controversial, considerations in any free trade area. The movement of people, it really does, especially if you have, a continent that has stark differences in terms of, different environments that are, the levels of development are not the same generally as you would find in continents like Europe, for example. So the movement of people is really a hot potato, as well as competition law. And then, of course, later we'll establish the customs union. But of course, all of this are influenced by the socio-economic factors of what we want to achieve as a nation, as a continent. And of course, in today's world, triple bottom line recording, ESG factors, economic, social, and governance, very critical. You cannot just up and start building a factory there. Those factors need to be considered. Gender equality in the continent, still a huge challenge in terms of women-owned businesses. And of course, structural transformation in terms of the economic environment and in terms of the infrastructure to move goods. Because in some cases, for instance, it is much more cheaper to import something from Europe than from a country within Africa. As another African country, mainly because of the fact that it will take you much longer to arrive in your country, in some cases, or mainly because there isn't the infrastructure to receive or expedite the type of transaction you're doing. So that is an issue. We also want to build great companies. Africa has about right now just over we have about more than 20 companies that are worth over $1 billion on the continent, and the idea is to try and and increase that so that we can have, more spend and more economic growth, because Africa has 1.2 billion people, as you know, and by 2030, that 1.2 billion would be sitting, I think you'll see the statistics when we get to that point. Now, but of course, industrialization, very key, for development on the continent and everywhere else. So there's a lot of opportunity around industrialization, product development, regional value chains, and what that means, for example, is that Volkswagen, VW should be able to make their cars in South Africa and maybe have a supplier for their seats in Botswana, and another supplier of their grills for the car in front in Mozambique, those kind of things. So the regional value chain creation also becomes important, because as we are now on the continent, the regional value chain is very low or non-existent. So that's another opportunity there for us to create one. Obviously, of course, also to eliminate tariffs, particularly non-tariff barriers, which is important. For example, right now, what the African Union is trying to do is to agree on what we call a quality policy, which will have some quality standards. For example, if food moves from South Africa to the DRC and it's canned, we need to be assured that that food has the same health standards, in DRC than the same it has in South Africa. So we need to basically harmonize, if I can put it that way, and harmonize our quality policies as well as a continent. And I actually recently assisted the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry to review the draft agreement on the what we call the Africa Quality Policy, because you can imagine, if you don't have that, you will have some of the cases we've had at the WTO, for example, where I think there was a case on tuna fish. I'm not sure if it was Nicaragua, but one of those Latin American countries took the US to the WTO because of the US had a non-tariff barrier, which had concerns about the way in which the fish is caught in the water. So if they considered you catching the fish as being inhumane to the fish, then they wouldn't, trade with you on the product, and that was considered to be a non-tariff barrier, and those basically has to do with sanitary and phytosanitary, measures in the WTO. So it's important that non-tariff barriers are eliminated. To trading services, very key. We spoke about financial, but also, of course, to cooperate, intellectual property rights on customs matters, so that we have, ease of trade within the continent. Most of the countries in Africa are currently launching the single window, entry for their trading services. The transmission of documents have also now gone digital, to try and accelerate, customs clearance and so forth. Because without a coordinated approach, you end up having inefficiencies within the system. And by the way, in South Africa, over the past, few days, our biggest logistics company, Transnet, which is state-owned, was hacked. And that is just to show you the sign around cooperation. If you don't have that, because then what happens is that the ports were affected, the rails were affected, the movement of cargo generally was affected. And 80% of South African imports come via the sea. They arrive at the port of Durban, in South Africa. And there was quite a huge risk for us as a country, and still is, because they're only trying to get back online now. They've been hacked, I think, for the past 2 weeks now. So the issue of collaboration and all of that is very important. Settlement of disputes, very key, because if you don't have way mechanisms to settle a dispute, you'll end up like the WTO dispute settlement body, which is currently paralyzed because of the Americans' unhappiness with the DSB. And then, of course, to just basically generally have all the protocols in place regarding trade goods and services. Right now, the protocols that apply to trade tariff concessions, rules of origin. As those of you who are trade people understand this terminology. Those of you who are not must look out for our webinars on trade in Africa that we do from time to time under legal webinars, where we unpack some of these topics. But in the main, these are the current protocols that have been approved under the WTO. I've already mentioned that migration and competition still remain unresolved. So those are still issues for negotiation as we hit now. I don't want to go into the detail of the import duties and all of that, but here it's just a snapshot once again of where the Afcfta is, and effectively you can see the yellow parts on the left of your screen: protocol on trading services, protocol in trading goods, and rules and procedures on dispute settlement. Those ones are annexures of the agreement, and those ones have been approved. And to the right, protocol on competition policy, protocol on intellectual policy, as well as protocol on investments. Those are still to be finalized, and that will form phase 2 of the Afcfta. So in a nutshell, the Afcfta is there to try and sort of short circuit the whole legislative environment that Africa and many continents battle with when you have too many countries with different legislation. So on this slide, I just have, sorry Anna, I did it in red, but I just wanted to emphasize, and effectively here, this is just facts, currently there's 1.2 billion. By 2030, there'll be 1.7 billion people on the African continent. Over the past century, the annual FDI, foreign direct investment in infrastructure, has doubled to $80 billion. So that's over at the beginning of this century. So it's still very low if you think about how big the continent is. That means there's a huge potential upswing for people who are players in the infrastructure environment. And obviously the infrastructure we're talking about here is stuff like dams, that have to be built, electricity grids, talking about serious economic infrastructure and so forth. Roads in particular in most of the African countries is a huge challenge and so forth. So if you're an entrepreneur, there's a lot of opportunity. Look at the estimates there that Africa has the fastest growing middle class. That is individuals spending between $2 and $20 a day, and it's going to rise by 100% in less than 20 years, by 2060. So which means that in 2060 the middle class would have doubled by 100%. So that's really amazing if you think about the potential of what could still happen, or will still happen rather, because I think the process is irreversible. It has to happen. As I've said in my opening, trade is, the quickest way out of the ghetto. If you want to raise people out of poverty, you have to make sure that you accelerate trade. And I'm a great champion of accelerating intra-Africa trade. And just, from a structural point of view, to show you how the markets in Africa work, look at Nigeria. 70% of Nigeria's distribution network is through outdoor markets. So basically your flea markets and stuff, and there's a huge, especially in North and Central Africa, in fact, maybe most of Africa, except of course for South Africa, because South Africa has a much more, structured economy. So the people who do your outdoor markets and stuff as a daily activity, as a business, are considered, what we call the second economy. So it's almost like you have the formal one with the big banks and big business, and then you have the informal one, which is mainly the greatest creator of wealth for many people. Not even wealth, but sustainability, because this talks in the South African environment about the ladies who sell, tomatoes around the corner, or cabbage or spinach. When you go home, you can buy something from them and all of that. But look in Nigeria, it's 70%. Yeah. This informal economy that we're talking about. So that means there's an opportunity for packaging stuff correctly. If I can just give you an example, I remember a book I read a few years ago, many years ago, because I don't even remember the title, but this was talking about, local economics and how to change your packaging to speak to, the crowd you want. And the example that was given there is that traditionally shampoo companies, would have a 750 milliliter bottle of shampoo that they put on the supermarket shelf, and they're expecting someone to come and buy a 750 milliliter bottle to take home for shower bath or whatever. But you could actually take that 750 milliliter and break it down into sachets of 5 milliliters or 10 milliliter sachet, so it becomes affordable to someone who cannot afford to buy a 750 milliliter, and then those sachets then become what you sell in that particular market. So you basically need to work around the market in which you operate, and not just come in with a traditional model. So I think that gives those models. Independent grocer stores make up around 60% of distribution channels in Algeria, Morocco, and Cameroon, as opposed to in South Africa, for example, where the chain stores would actually be 80% of the distribution channel, because we in South Africa you have a mall at every corner. So you have a very poor in some cases a very poor village across the street, and across the road there's a huge shopping mall with all those international brands you can imagine. So it really is a different environment. So the chain stores would have more structure there. But anyway, what are the opportunities now? And let's now close this and see where the things are. So the first issue is the issue about population growth in the continent. I mean, by 2030, that's scary. It's actually 9 years from now. Africa will have 1.7 billion people. Of course, praying that the coronavirus doesn't affect those numbers drastically, as because of how bad it is. But I mean, that's 1.7 billion people. 80% over the next few years will be moving into urban cities. Urbanization is the fastest growing in Africa at the moment. The income arising, especially colleagues, as you've seen now with digital, the days are gone where you have to have a lot of capital to start a business. You'll recall that previously, if you wanted to start a business, it had to be a factory. You had to get huge capital outlays to build a factory, buy the machines, hire 1,000 people, and that's the only way you could become, a billionaire in those days. But now you can do that sitting in your PJs in your dining room somewhere, just having a laptop. People become, I mean, most of the billionaires we have in the world today are tech people. They don't even have one factory in some instances. And these guys are multi-billionaires. They even, flying to space and all of that. That's how much money is generated from this digital world. So it tells you that it is a sign of what is to come, because if you have, people already doing that, it means the rest of the world is going to catch up and make money from that. So look at the annual spending by African consumers and businesses to reach 6.6 trillion by dollars. That's by 2030. So 9 years from now, Anna, and that will be up by 4 trillion in the past 4 years. So clearly, colleagues, you can see, maybe you must just all move to Africa and come and take advantage of all these examples, seeing that you are interested in finding out what's going on there. So just, you can see what the opportunities are. Industrialization, unbelievable. Factories, we're going to need factories left, right, and center. Right now, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, for example, wants to make sure that a lot of manufacturing happens on the African continent. So instead of the traditional model of importing stuff from Europe and China and so forth, the default position of African countries right now is that we must try and do as much production as possible within Africa. And for that, what it means is that there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration, from people in your part of the world, to look for partners in Africa and to partner with them to penetrate the market jointly and create opportunities. So that is very exciting from an African point of view. So production is going to double to nearly 1 trillion within a decade. So it just shows you, how the demand is growing. And of course, many companies are also looking for alternative markets to do their manufacturing in. For example, I had already told you that, VW has a plant in South Africa. They recently opened a plant in Rwanda as well. Rwanda is one of the hottest stocks at the moment. If there were a stock, I would bet on Rwanda. There's just so much going on there economically right now, and they're really punching above their weight. There's opportunity for manufacturing and so forth. Infrastructure, there's an estimated deficit of 800 billion in terms of infrastructure development on the African continent. So what that means is that there's still an opportunity for $800 billion to be spent just to build infrastructure in Africa and to bring it up to, our first world continent and all of that. So for those guys who are, in the venture capital fund or whatever, those type of industries, it's an opportunity to look out for. Because what this tells you as well, it means there's opportunities around construction, cement, and all those kind of construction related materials are going to be in huge demand in this continent. Agriculture, Africa, is rich, as you have already seen, in minerals. Agriculture especially, but is very untapped because unfortunately what happened over the past, few decades is that farming became unfashionable for African people because we all wanted to go and stay in the cities. Yes, of course, I'm also guilty as charged. Um, and of course, that has left a gap. In fact, right now in South Africa, the government is trying to promote farming to young people because we don't have that anymore. So as a result, there's a lot of opportunity, especially a new big thing in Africa is agro processing, which is basically just buying vegetables or whatever, chopping them up, packaging them nicely, and putting them on the supermarket shelf and all of that. But just look at gas, for example. How much gas has been discovered in Africa recently. By the way, most of the gas has been discovered in less than the past 10 years. In South Africa, we also discovered some gas, a few years ago. And that is definitely going to be a huge player in the oil and gas market. I think especially with oil, being under threat over the next few maybe decades, I'm sure that gas will eventually also play a huge role in that. And Africa has plenty of that as well, as we have seen. Mobile access, wow, I can't even say that. I mean, imagine you're Apple and you have 1.2 billion handsets on the African continent that people have bought, and you still have over the next 9 years another 500 million or so that's going to buy your handsets. It tells you it's a no-brainer in terms of, I mean, just look at the numbers that they speak for themselves. Africa has more than 120 mobile active 120 million active mobile accounts. So most of the monies on the continent currently are being done via mobile platforms and all of that. And that's 50% of the global total. So that's quite huge already with a huge potential upswing. And then of course look at the market. From traditional banking, which has seemed to have fallen by the wayside, except for some banks are very strong on digital. So the transactions outside of the formal banking structure will reach the 300 billion mark by 2025. So meaning that currently it's probably sitting at about 250 billion or so. So it just shows you from a digital point of view, what the possibilities are. But nonetheless, just to run through all of this, I've spoken about food products. Africa also exports a lot of raw, and products they didn't, beneficiate. And they send it over to other countries. Those countries package them and send them back to Africa for selling it to Africa. So that's an opportunity around food processing, as I've mentioned. Solar energy, Africa has the best climate for solar energy. In South Africa, it's really ramped up. Most of the African countries are catching up. And that means there's a huge opportunity on the continent to roll out solar grids all over the continent. Education, huge opportunity in Africa. As people are urbanizing, they're going to want more education. And now even better. In fact, the University of Cape Town is called UCT in short. A week ago, launched for the first time an online high school. I mean, for them as a university, because remember, traditional universities don't get involved in high schools, but they have just launched an online high school from 2022. And that obviously will become a trend into the future. I was actually talking to a friend of mine yesterday, asking him, why don't we open a school as well online? Because it's just seems so easy with Zoom and that. I mean, we're having a master class here, Anna, so that's by a school in a way. So yes, real estate, I can't even mention that. There's a lot of things that need to be built. You've seen we're urbanizing, so property is a huge potential in Africa. Most of my mentor, who is based in Amsterdam, when he comes to South Africa to see me from time to time, he always gets surprised by the huge tracts of land between our highways in South Africa, a car going opposite direction and the other one going the opposite. And he says, in my country, we don't have any land, not even, we can't even spend 1 centimeter just to have a gap between roads. So we still have lots and lots of land, and real estate is going to be a big thing. Fintech, I've spoken about. Mobile is the future. It's the present, actually. Everything is happening there now. So there's a lot of opportunity for fintech industries as the growing population and the spend on the continent increases as well. Transportation, very lucrative business in Africa. Of course, if we have 1.7 billion people, they need to move around. Once again, infrastructure is also involved there because you need to build the railways and the highways and the factories to manufacture those cars. And of course, for venture capitalists, startup funding has also risen in Africa to take advantage of this healthcare. The coronavirus has exposed even South Africa, which, I mean, most African leaders who need medical attention go to South Africa. But the coronavirus has exposed us that we actually are not world class in terms of our medical environment. Of course, in our case, for example, we have two health systems. We have the state health system and the private medical care system, which obviously gets the best. And those kind of inequalities have come to bite us now during COVID, and those are the things that shows you the opportunity that lies there. From healthcare services, especially lately, because you also have healthcare services, telecare as they call it, where now in some of our institutions here, you can actually consult with a medical doctor without being in his presence physically, via, a platform or so, and he can, diagnose you and all of that. So I think that those are opportunities. Arts and craft, I can't talk. In 2014, there was an antique African art that was sold for $41 million in New York. So there's art everywhere in Africa, as you know, rock art and all sorts of art, from ancient times that most African people don't even know qualify as art. And in fact, some of the old paintings we inherited from our grandparents, if one had to do a valuation, we might find that they were something, maybe not $41 million, but something at least. So there's also an opportunity around that. And of course, Africans are like Latin Americans. We have rhythm as well. So arts and entertainment and crafts is really an important element of our being. And then, of course, retail opportunities and all of that. Developing apps, very huge market for that. I think of apps every day, but I don't know where to start. If I could, I'd probably just sit and do apps every day, but it tells you there's an opportunity. Payment solutions, also an important. Recently, as a firm, we have our first payment solution where we can advertise something, you click on it, and then it goes to our bank and we get paid. And I'm very excited about that because those are things I used to think are for the big companies, but we are also able to do that now. So that's grateful. And of course, agriculture. Tourism, of course, we want to encourage that, Anna, to make sure there's a lot of, tourism between our continents, very important. Fashion, and then, of course, digital marketing, Anna, which we use as every day, you and I, to try and get the world together. So, of course, like many other continents, there's three different, type of growing companies that have been identified on the continent. For example, stable growing countries like Morocco and Egypt and all of that, they consider to be a bit stable. And then you have vulnerable countries, and those are basically countries where there's a lot of instability. Either maybe there's a lot of terrorist group attacks or there's political instability. The DRC is, for example, one of those, Nigeria, and also they're also vulnerable because they depend on one commodity. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, there's only oil. that they focus on, and then that is a risk and vulnerability for a country, because if oil goes out of fashion tomorrow, what are you going to generate income from? So those are countries that are considered to be a bit vulnerable from a governance model as well. And then, of course, slow growers. Unfortunately, South Africa also falls under the slow growing countries at the moment. Of course, the pandemic also didn't help. I guess you may find that if I read the news tomorrow, these two may have shifted around. So some of them may now perhaps have become stable growers or slow growers, or be vulnerable because of what the pandemic has done. So I guess there's a moving target. And then, of course, in the next decade, Africa will have nearly 90 cities, and the per capita income is increasing and so forth. So, colleagues, we literally have nowhere else to be but in Africa. So, Anna, having said that, I think, at first when I was asked to talk about this topic, I was like, okay, but I'm not a business expert in Africa. I'm a lawyer, but I must tell you that it has really helped me as well, as an African, to go through and do a quick scan. I'm not only a lawyer, I'm also a businessman. I mean, I'm involved, for example, in the supplying of brake blocks for trains on the African continent, with many different railway companies here. And this has helped me to sort of, have a holistic view of, what's going on in the continent, where things are. So for me, it's been a strategic thing to see where the continent is going to go. And I think in terms of my thinking for future opportunities, I will certainly think along the lines of the things that I've just identified. So Anna, that is my presentation for today. And I hope you found value in it, and that you enjoyed it as much as I did. So thank you very much, Anna.
Well, no, thank you, Ronnie, for your presentation. It's very clear that we have a lot of opportunities to look at in Africa, and I think that all of us in the room could take this message. Now, I would like to offer the word to the people here in the room. Well, first, we already have one message from Marcelo. Marcelo, I could give you the word if you think so. So I will put your microphone on so that you can actually do the question right directly to Ronnie. Let me just like Marcelo, do you hear me there? I don't know if Marcelo is hearing us. Marcelo, you can actually activate your microphone and do
Yes,
your question directly to
uh,
Ronnie.
are you there, Hannah? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. We're hearing you. So please, it will be nice to hear where are you from, what do you do, and then you can ask your question to Ronnie.
Okay, sure. First of all, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Ronnie. It's a pleasure to be
Yes.
here in your presentation. It's really very good to be from here hearing you. Well, I am from Argentina. I represent a medical device company dedicated to the design, manufacturing, and commercialization of medical devices, and with commercial presence or in 5 continents, in around 85 countries in these continents. Ronnie, I really enjoyed your presentation very much. I would like to, in particular, I would like to ask you about the following. As I just told you, medical devices is my expertise, and I would like to know what kind of challenges you consider there are in Africa, and in particular in some countries like South Africa and Tunisia and Egypt. And when I'm talking about this kind of challenges, I'm referring, in generally speaking, to regulatory issues, customs issues, and internal transport issues, if there is any. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. Look, the regulatory issues around the medical equipment you're talking about are really not many, because remember that the people who procure these tools would basically be the industry itself directly. And we do not have stringent laws in the country relating to medical equipment. As long as the equipment is meant to save lives and to enhance people's wellness, there wouldn't be any regulatory authority. Usually, the regulatory issues around medical issues are more around medications and stuff, because those require, of course, the South African Health Products Council to approve those. But like any other country, if you're supplying a machine or equipment or whatever, you need to get the relevant, standard approvals. In South Africa, we have what we call the South African Bureau of Standards, SABS, which is where if you want to supply a new product in the country, you would have to go to and get an approval from them that they've approved it. And then once that is done, then you're free to trade with it in any way. And that is generally the approach for most African countries as well.
Okay, Ronnie, just one more question, if I may, Anna and Ronnie.
Yes, please.
Ronnie, do you know which could be the lead time, the delayed time to get the approval for a medical device? Thank you.
There isn't any lead times. That will purely be dependent on the amount of work they have at the Bureau of Standards. It shouldn't take too long, to be honest with you. We have a very effective, standards authority in South Africa who don't want to, hassle people by delaying their approval. So I don't think it would even take you, more than, say, 60 days. Once you have a product, you send it through, all the testings are done, and if they like it, they will take it. So let's target at least about 60 days, 90 days maximum, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your reply. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Marcelo. Anybody else in the room that would like to make a question to Ronnie? Well, meanwhile, perhaps we have participants thinking about the questions. Ronnie, I have one question. We've been helping companies to look to the African market, and one of the concerns of the people that actually they don't have clear are the logistics. Yes. So what could be a good entry port to entry to the African market, and how logistics actually work? I mean, not all Africa, but perhaps you can focus in the South African market, how the logistics work there, and what would be like a good port of entry in order if I want to get to the South African market, for instance.
Thank you for that, Anna. Our port of entry is Durban mainly. That's the main one. That's where 80% of South African imports arrive. Durban. It's the biggest port in Africa, and it's very busy and efficient. The logistics generally in South Africa are very good. We have, for example, in South Africa, we have more than 1 million kilometers that are tarred all over. So basically, most of the country's tarred roads. Our highways connecting the ports to the inland, and also, in fact, most of the countries in SADC receive their goods at the port of Durban as well. So there's a huge, logistics in terms of trucks and trains that carry stuff from the port to the inland and to the neighboring countries in South Africa, all the way up until the DRC and beyond. We have a railway line that's able to get all the way there. Of course, the rail infrastructure in the rest of the continent is being revamped or improved, but in the South African case in particular, we don't have logistical challenges, except, of course, under extraordinary circumstances. Like I've mentioned, our ports logistic company was hacked last week for the first time, and that delayed stuff. And also last week or 2 weeks ago, when we had those riots in South Africa, that also affected our movement of goods. But under normal course of events, we have a very world-class, logistics business in the country. Many private players, and of course the one big state player that plays in that, and of course also other players from the region itself, that also transport goods between South Africa and the rest of the African continent. So we have a very good infrastructure for that.
Good, Ronnie. Thank you very much. One more question. So you just told us that perhaps the regulatory system is not like much of a hazard when entering to the market, and logistics are as well very well planned. So what do you think are the main barriers, or perhaps like bottlenecks for actually businessmen going to the African market?
Yes. The first one, of course, is language, Anna. I think that's an important one for everyone around the world. The second thing, it would be about around the efficiency of the particular customs border you have to cross, as there's no uniformity at the moment currently, and of course the Afcfta is trying to resolve that, by creating this one, a single window in terms of trade facilitation. So trade facilitation still remains a challenge now. Most of the African countries are busy, setting up all the systems to make it more efficient. And every day we've seen many different countries launching, their authorities to make sure that trade facilitation does happen as per the requirements there. And then, of course, in some cases, also remembering that, of course, the country is very diverse in terms of, the different countries and cultures you find. In some cases, you may have, a challenge of corruption, because in some countries, for example, you need to have a political network for you to get business. Which, by the way, in South Africa is very different, because in South Africa we actually have a corporate governance code, that regulates all corporate conduct. So even if you know the president, there's no way you're going to get a deal from the state if you didn't do the right compliance submissions. And if you do, we have a very active judicial system here, that adjudicates, fairly on matters. Of course, it takes long, and that's why it's important, of course, to have your dispute resolution, as another factor, and very clearly defined, in your relationship. And most people in international transactions would opt for sort of like, your ISID, in independent sort of international, arbitration, or to make sure that they get fairness from the system. But the courts in Africa generally are very objective. There hasn't been instances where courts were found to be biased towards African people or African business people. All cases are basically, resolved on their merits. So the judicial system is fairly stable on the continent, yeah. But those factors I've mentioned, and also I think on some part of the continent, of course, the transportation of your goods may be a big challenge. So it's going to be very important to make sure that your logistics are agreed upon upfront, before you go into those countries and all of that, yeah. But other than that, Anna, the normal business risk of your business not making it, I think that one is normal. So that could be, of course, a challenge as well. But generally, if you have all those ducks in a row, you have a product that people actually want, because that's obviously very important. I think if you have all of that in place, you shouldn't have many other challenges around that, and so on. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. I see Sylvia has a question, and Sylvia, you already have your microphone available if you want to ask directly to Ronnie.
Thank you, Anna, very much. And first of all, thank you for this initiative. And dear Ronnie, thank you for sharing with us this valuable information. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sylvia, we're hearing you.
Okay. So my name is Sylvia Ray. I work at the International Affairs Department at the National Business Association, ANDI. We have more than 1,400 member companies. And I would like to ask Ronnie if he knows which is like the most complete and reliable platform where companies can know about tariff and non-tariff measures in order to export to Africa, or any platform about like statistics of foreign trade, such as imports and export statistics.
Hi, Sylvia. Yes, of course. If you want trade statistics, you need to go to the South African Revenue Services. It's called, abbreviation is SARS, almost like the SARS flu virus, SARS, right? They are the tax collector in South Africa, and they have statistics that you are looking for at any given time, Sylvia. So if you want any trade statistics, you can simply go there. The other important, institution I think you should look for, mainly from a tariff point of view, and that kind of thing, is ITAC, ITAC. There's the International Trade Administration Commission of South Africa, so it's just ITAC. They basically are the regulator of international trade. So usually what happens in international transactions is that, for example, the gentleman earlier on was talking about equipment, and equipment may have some tariffs on it. And if you're not aware of it, you may just quote, give a quotation on a price. But when you are supposed to get to actually pay, you realize you didn't factor in, the tariffs, the dumping duties, or whatever duties that have been factored in. So SARS will still have all that information, but ITAC is just to give you can get, for example, the list of commodities and, the tariff lines and all of those you can get with SARS as well. So, and then of course there's me. So you can always drop me an email as well. I hope, Anna will share that. And you guys, of course, my number as well, Anna, because I've learned that, apparently handheld devices have a 70% read rate, meaning that people don't read emails anymore because they have a 20% read rate now. So feel free to share that. And anytime, colleagues, if you have a question or you want to do something, in South Africa and on the continent, be at liberty to call me up. So yes, that would basically be your sources for your information, Sylvia.
Thank you very much. So valuable, all this information, and thank you for your kindness as well.
Thank you, Sylvia. You're more than welcome. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. Yes, I would like to remind all of the people that are in the room that we actually are opening a Telegram chat room, so that actually you can stay in touch with the advisors. So, Ronnie, we have Nicolas Jr. Nicolas, I think, Nicolas, you're from Cameroon. I have already turned on your microphone, so actually you can directly make a comment if you would like.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Nicolas. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Renee, for this opportunity. I'm Nicolas. I'm from Cameroon, based in Japan. I'm involved in import-export. So I just wanted to make some comments about the presentation because, as Ronnie said during his presentation, we have some different approach doing business in Africa. I think it's also good to hear from somebody who is coming from another part of the continent. So what I would like to say is that I'm not a law professional. So I'm engineer and also business administrator. So just to say that I will get another approach in business. So in our continent, I think we lack infrastructure, as Ronnie said. And I believe that to involve, people are looking Africa as a marketplace, but I believe Africa shouldn't be looked at as a marketplace, but at a place where we can get opportunity to invest in terms of, because Africa, as far as we can see, hasn't yet get his first revolution, industrial revolution. I think we need to invest in infrastructure to transform our own raw material at first, before even becoming a market, because we don't have money to buy abroad. When doing business in Africa, most of the time it's foreign companies that are buying from abroad to sell to some medium or high level consumers. I think to make a better use of this market is to invest in terms of providing at first work to people in Africa, then expect maybe in medium term having a real market. So that's the comment I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Nicholas. I think you are absolutely spot on. We don't want to just have a market. I think the real need is really in developing the continent. And I think what Nicholas is trying to say is that even though, of course, before you set up, a market or an industry, you obviously first want to, launch your product and grow it. But the ultimate end goal should be to set up a plant or a factory in the African continent somewhere. So in that way, we make sure that we are not just a market where money gets shipped out of the continent, but there is some form of tit for tat in terms of foreign direct investment and the impact that has, of course, in growing. Getting people out of poverty. And then I think I really ascribe to what you said. So thank you very much for that input, Nicholas.
Yes, Ronnie, and to add on that, definitely right now, we all know that the value chains in the world are changing, and perhaps there has been and we are going through a process of reaccommodation of value chains, where regional value chains are very important right now. So investment has never been a priority more than ever. Because now companies would need to have a strategy, not only of trade, but as well of entering, knowing the markets, and that way getting into the regional markets. So, well, Ronnie, we don't have any more questions, and we already are it's already 9:30 a.m. Colombia time. I think it's 4:30 p.m. South Africa time, perhaps. So
definitely. 4:30. You're mastering it now, Anna.
Great. So thank you very much, Ronnie, for your time, for your knowledge, for sharing this scenario with us. We are trying to build the knowledge that we need to build in order to get Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia closer. We want to see a Southern Hemisphere full of curated knowledge and experts. And Ronnie, you've been part of this project since the very first beginning. Thank you so much. And thank you all in the room that have been participating in this masterclass. So thank you all and have a very good day.
Colleagues, thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it. Enjoy your day further. Goodbye.
Goodbye.